My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of Rebuild North Bay Foundation. This podcast is specifically designed to bring you people who have been through what maybe you have just gone through or that you are concerned about. We created the podcast How to Disaster to show you the breadth and depth of humanity in the midst of this really terrible thing that happened. I wanted to do this podcast so that I could bring some of the most amazing leaders that I've ever known in my life to you. You may have just experienced a disaster, and you may be looking around and you are dealing with trauma and the shock of it. And you may be wondering, I don't know how to do this part. And so we purposefully made this podcast into different sections and different topics of recovery so that you could pick and choose what would work for you at that time. So welcome to How to Disaster, and thank you for giving us your time. Hi, welcome to How to Disaster, a podcast to recover, rebuild, and reimagine post-disaster. My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of Rebuild North Bay Foundation. Today, we're going to talk about how to organize your community after a disaster, but this can also be used for communities who are concerned about a disaster that might come their way or if they are in some way vulnerable. One thing COVID has taught us is that all of our communities are somewhat vulnerable to disaster, and to be prepared is to actually build resiliency into your system. But for a lot of communities, as soon as they have a disaster, it's really difficult to even figure out where to begin. How do we even start? And there isn't a lot of information out there about how to organize your community. Well, in 2017, where I live in Sonoma County, we experienced a terrible disaster. Today, I'm so pleased to introduce you to Pam Van Halsema. She is a block captain and a member of Coffey Strong. It is a community-based group that came out of the suburban area. It was a PUD called Coffey Park. Pam, welcome to this podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm glad to be here.
So could you go ahead and just start at the beginning and sort of tell us your story? Because I know that you lost your home in the fire and have been really on the forefront of how we've recovered over these past 3 years.
Sure. I've been living in Coffey Park and raised my 3 children here for the past 20 years. We moved in 2001. I had, at the time of the Tubbs fire in 2017, I had been working as a teacher librarian in Petaluma, which is a town near here, in a big junior high. And so I have a background in education, and I have a background in information science. And prior to that, I had worked at Sonoma State University for 15 years. And I did a lot of community work and communications work. So these were some of the things that I already did in the local area at the time of that terrible night when the fire struck. And believe it or not, that weekend of the fire, I had just spent 2 days in Sacramento with my team of teachers from Petaluma at a workshop on how to help kids who have been through trauma. And so we had been helping trauma-informed care of children all weekend, when literally I came home, went to bed, dropped my stuff from the workshop, went to bed, and woke up at 2 a.m. with our neighborhood burning down. And, you know, my family was quick. We got up. My husband was the one who first woke up. We evacuated. We put on our emergency radio and heard that there was an evacuation center at one of our, it's called Finley Recreation Center near us, and we went there. And immediately, all these people were evacuating. It was people were pouring in, including some nursing home residents. And I thought, whoa, I just went through this training and trauma, and I thought, I have to go help some of these seniors. And immediately, I was kind of in that mindset of like, what can we do? How can I use what I have to offer in this emergency situation? And I appreciated being there because I felt like at at the emergency center, I was getting updates on what was going on rather than being in a parking lot. I know a lot of people who evacuated to sit in their car in a parking lot or something else. It's like, I'm getting information here. Having a background also in information science and libraries, it's what we do. Maybe people don't realize it's what library people do is we vet information and then we get it to people when they need it. And so I had that mindset already, having learned that my house burned down. I went down to my sister's in the South Bay and started coming up with lists of questions. I had so many questions, and I knew that many thousands of others had probably the exact same questions. So I started to reach out and crowdsource. What are the answers? Where do we even begin? I had never done anything like this before. And as it turns out, some others in my neighborhood were doing the same, and really concerned that we all kind of figure out what our next steps are, what our first steps are, and how we get our footing. Because what a major disaster. I don't know if everybody listening to this realizes the scope of this disaster, but it was over 5,000 homes burned in that one night. And in my own neighborhood itself, through about 1,300 homes burned down.
And for those who aren't familiar, because I do have people on from other disasters, we are referring to the October 2017 wildfire disaster that affected Lake Sonoma, Napa, and Mendocino counties and destroyed over 9,000 structures, burned for 23 days. And I think just the damage alone it was well over $1 billion. Yeah. $1.5 billion in damage. It was really an overwhelming scope. And until that moment, nobody had ever even seen a wildfire like this that was this destructive at all. And so it was really a wake-up call and traumatizing.
And I just lived in a regular working class neighborhood. I mean, it was wildfire. Why would it ever hit there? It seemed like a freakish thing.
Well, and Pam, let's also talk about the fact that the neighborhood you lived in was not in the WUI, which is the wildland urban interface. The neighborhood you lived in was in the middle of a city, a suburban city, and the fire actually had to take an overpass to get to you and then circle around and then find a vacant a vacant lot in order to take out Coffey Park. And it did it really quickly, and nobody expected Coffey Park to be vulnerable. And I think that's an important message here.
Exactly. It was so fast. I went to bed at 11 o'clock and I was sitting on the edge of my daughter's bed making plans. It was Sunday night, which was actually a blessing, I think, because Saturday night, kids might have been out at sleepovers and all these different things, but we were getting ready for another school day on Monday. And so I'm glad my family was all at home. But it was a hot night in October. The windows were open. I could smell smoke. And I said to her, I remember saying, I think the neighbors are smoking in their backyard, because I smelled smoke. I thought, that's a really strong smell. So obviously that was not the source of that smell, but we were aware. It was kind of a weird night, like saying that. And that was only 3 hours later is when we had to rush out of our house. I could barely close my front door because of the high winds. I remember having to take two hands and pull like this to get my door to shut. My house was not yet on fire, which is another reason why I think I was able to recover more quickly than some who literally were fleeing a burning home. I got out more quickly, and so I wasn't dealing with that really horrific memory. Which
it's one of the reasons why I say, in all seriousness, when we do have those Diablo wind nights, sleep in clothes. A lot of people had to evacuate sans clothing, not only everything they own, but that includes any clothing on them. If they were lucky, they had a cell phone. That's it.
Yeah, bare feet, people with burned feet. Yeah. So truly a ridiculously crazy experience. And so, but then what happened? A week later, and we were all, questions popped up kind of rolling in one after another, like, when do we get to go back to our lot? That's the number one question. When do we get to go back? What do we do? What do we do with our insurance? Can I find a place to live temporarily? These are the burning questions at first. And so reaching out through the insurance and really having trusted leadership in our local officials made a huge and enormous difference. And we developed over time really great relationships with both our city and our county officials and our state officials as well. They went up to bat for us, and we were able to ask for their help. And we were also able to offer them information that we had about what it was like. What were the challenges we're facing? What were some of the stumbling blocks? What were some of the things that made things easier when we needed them? So
let's talk about that. So just to take people back, it's what, like, was it within like 2 weeks after the fires that you all met at Luther Burbank with Supervisor Gore?
Yeah, Supervisor Gore, who's our county supervisor, he was very heavily, his district, District 4 of Sonoma County, was the most heavily hit.
You know, it's interesting, it wasn't.
Oh, it wasn't?
Nope, District 1 was the most heavily hit. However, you all were so successful in your community organization that the perception remained that District 4 was the most heavily hit, but it actually wasn't. And this is a great,
that's interesting.
This is a great testimony to why having a strong public official in the front of you and who has your back, and how organizing your community as soon as possible actually changes the entire trajectory of your recovery. So I appreciate that you got that. And but also it really is in the way this weird compliment to all of the work that you've done.
Well, we all helped each other, but one thing I just want to say is navigating disaster, it's never just about one person. And so with Coffey Strong, we were just neighbors, and we continue to be just neighbors who were impacted by the fire. And we all were from this area of Coffey Park, and we wanted to get through this as quickly as possible with as few roadblocks along the way, and problem solve together along the way. And our stakeholders of our organization, at first we were just neighbors getting together. Supervisor Gore recommended a meeting, and one of my neighbors, Jeff Okrepke, organized the meeting where we got together as neighbors. They just put it out on social media, which, by the way, I had a neighborhood social media account already, which we just expanded at the time of the fire, and it became a really good hub for communicating immediately, because that's one of the biggest problems is where do the people go? You know, there's one thing about organizing, and I've done advocacy and organizing before, and it involves knocking on doors. But when all the doors are burned down, how do you do it? And so with no doors left and not really understanding who are my neighbors and I know where they live, but I don't know what their email address is. I don't know what their phone number is. That was really a challenge. But we had that meeting, and just, you know, raise your hand if you want to volunteer to help be a block captain, which is just a volunteer who will be a contact person who will be informed on what's happening.
But tell us about what is the cost. So the block captaining is essentially you all mapped out together, you know, how many houses or blocks you can take responsibility for. And talk to us about the actual nitty gritty. So say that you're somebody listening to or watching this podcast, you've just gone through a disaster.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to do this. So we're going to have a follow-up with zone captains.
Okay.
But how do you even do, I mean, how do you even, like, where do you even begin? This is a logistical podcast.
Now, great. Well, ours started out with a map, like a street map. And there were certainly main drag arteries through our neighborhood. Mind you, we're not in a rural area. We had block, you know, they're not square, but we had definitely a couple big dividing lines of main streets. And so we divided Coffey Park into 5 sections. We called them area 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we just said, okay, everybody in area 1 go in the lobby. Everybody in area 2 go on the right side of the stage. Everybody area 3, you know, like just move your bodies over there. And then it was kind of a mess. You know, we're just trying, right? So like, okay, with notebook paper, who can just volunteer to be a volunteer leader for our area 4. I was in area 4. Well, then my red flag was going off is like, we're not going to be able to read their handwriting. We're not going to get their email address right. We need to have some kind of electronic tool to get this. Like we need to make sure our communications are really solid from the beginning. And so I volunteered to help with that. And like, okay, give me what we've got, and then let's really try to poll folks through using surveys and signups and different ways to make sure that we're getting the people. And all along the way, ensure that their privacy is paramount, that we're making a pledge. We came up with a privacy statement that we were not going to sell their information, share their information, not even with others unless they gave explicit permission. Because let's face it, you're vulnerable. When you are experiencing a disaster, everybody is out to get your insurance dollars or sell you something. And we were already, and then can we trust our insurance company? Building a trust is so important. And so we pledged as a group, Coffey Strong, to keep people's privacy really protected. And at the same time, really vet information and never promote commercial interests. We could, whenever we were like talking about companies for surveying land or grading or architects or landscape, any of that, we will provide a list of what resources are available in the community and make it more open and make it more like a directory of services. And we're not going to promote one over the other. And that was a really important thing as well, especially since we learned even the ones that we personally trusted, some of them went bankrupt. Some of them really had a lot of problems that they didn't anticipate either. So just be better to let the consumer do some of their due diligence as well, but just have a really good high integrity on vetting the information that we shared. And the other thing is having a regular way of communicating. I always like to have like people know every month they're going to get a newsletter. People know once a week you're going to hear from your block captain, whatever it is, just so people have a trusted, like, oh, I'll be hearing from them. I'll be hearing from them. Or we're going to ask to gather questions from our block. What are the questions you have right now? Because then the block captains would meet with the city officials and we would meet with each other and we'd say, oh, well, they're having this issue with drainage over here. Oh, who's got wattles that source for wattles over there? And you become an information exchange and a resource exchange with those meetings. But if you can imagine, yeah.
I want to pause there for a second and really focus on that because okay. I remember I worked for the county when the fires happened, and one of the issues is we're having all these town meetings, town halls, which seemed like a good idea in theory, but in practice, because of the trauma and because of the scale of what had happened here, it ended up being it was like an emotional dumping ground for people's fear and upset and anger, reasonably so, very traumatized. And so the public officials would be over here saying, hopefully saying, I understand and I hear you, but it became like this thing where it was hard for the public officials to hear what they needed to hear to help the community. And it was hard for the community to develop any kind of coherent message so they could actually get what they needed. And the genius of what you all did was that you developed this information flow where the public sector could actually hear what the needs and issues were, and then the people, the fire survivors, could actually not only have their concerns really attended to, but they could gather information and really make a change in their community. Like it was really super effective and remains effective to this day.
Well, a really strong recovery, I think, comes down to people. And when you try to do things big, and those big town halls, they were really good. I mean, I listened to them, I got information from them, But there is no way that one official or two officials standing up there can really look every one of those people in the eye and help them. So having a system for sharing that load and having a volunteer who's like, I'm going to take these 20 houses and I'm going to really help those 20. And when they have issues or questions, I'm going to funnel that concern to our group. And then we're going to also talk to the city or the county or whoever it is that really should be also aware of that problem or concern. Becomes a way that you're heard and you're listening. And so it's just not realistic that we can all be, I mean, whoever's shouting the loudest in one of those large meetings, there's a place for those large meetings. They're really, really important.
Absolutely, yeah.
But when it comes down to it, everyone's situation is so different, and their needs and their capacity to recover are different. And when you can break it down and share the load, it's more likely that people will make it through. And they know, like, I can call John. John is going to help me. But John, the other thing is, like, I sometimes would get the feeling that folks were like, oh, those fire survivors, they must all be crying all the time or whatever. And I thought, I am busy. Like, I am working. I am volunteering. I'm rebuilding my house. Like, sure. I mean, actually, I wasn't crying all the time. There were people, of course, were sad, but we've never been more busy than ever, because we have to come up, keep our lives going, but also work on this whole rebuild thing. It's a lot of work. So in order to just have this trusted group as well, my block that I can talk to, and they can help me and I can help them, they become what we call our fire family. And I have a couple of groups that I consider my fire family of people and neighbors that were like, we help each other out. We continue to. And it doesn't only help with knowing resources and answers to physical questions, but also your spirit stays alive. And you need that to get through this. Yeah.
That's part of the whole, I totally believe that one of the ways out of trauma is always to help someone else and to try to pay it forward, which is so much of, I've been really gratified by the ecosystem of caring, amazing human beings that I've met over the past 3 years who have contributed not only to their own communities in such really incredible ways that have paid it forward. So I just thank you. I'm just really, I'm like the best job in the world for this reason. I'm always so proud. But I would like to say that the, as part of the how-to is that it really gave your public officials, from city managers to mayors to, like Gabe Osborne was an amazing public servant. He really did a lot for your community. He was in the public works department. Building that trust, that really, it's like a trust portal between the public sector and the people who've been affected. Also enables the public sector to be effective, but it really just keeps building trust. And I think that it made parts of your rebuild just so much more effective. How rebuilt is Coffey Park today?
I would say 95% or 96, I think. So really, really far. And, we continue to meet with the city. It's been 3 years. I had a meeting Monday night with Gabe Osborne was there. The mayor comes often. The mayor actually lives in our neighborhood, which is, he didn't lose his house, but he's a neighbor. And we continue.
They had to drive, he and so Mayor Tom Schwedhelm and his wife, Jackie Schwedhelm. I worked with Jackie for years, so I'm especially fond of them. They had to drive through your neighborhood every day to get home. And so it was a constant reminder, as well it should be. And so he did feel like he was part of your recovery.
Navigating the recovery process after a fire is challenging, particularly with the additional issues caused by COVID-19. Fannie Mae is here to help. If you live in a FEMA-declared disaster area, you can request free assistance from our Disaster Response Network. Fannie Mae, in partnership with Maury Management International's Project Porchlight, launched the Disaster Response Network in 2018. This program uses HUD-approved counselors to offer support. These counselors have been specially trained as disaster coaches. They address the challenges homeowners and renters face when recovering from a disaster. There's no charge for their services. The goal of the Disaster Response Network is to help people return to pre-disaster normal as quickly as possible. Clients are matched with a coach who work with them one-on-one throughout their recovery. In the initial conversation with clients, coaches review the status of the homeowner's recovery process, including current challenges, decisions that need to be made, and immediate long-term goals. They discuss topics like income and expenses, insurance, housing, credit or debt challenges, as well as aid or other assistance programs that may be available. This may include FEMA applications and Small Business Administration or SBA loans. The coach helps the client plan and prioritize the next steps for their recovery. Moving forward, the coach continues to be there for the client, reaching out to them regularly, at least monthly, but more often when needed, for up to 18 months' time. These regular check-ins provide the client the opportunity to ask questions, get help tackling challenges, and keep things moving as they work through their recovery. It's also where coaches can help identify new recovery assistance or grants that have become available, strategize new next steps for recovery, and talk through difficult decisions or priorities. One of the key ways coaches assist Disaster Response Network clients is by helping intervene when something has gone awry. Coaches will, with the clients on the line, call insurance companies to adjust their claims when costs exceed initial estimates, or call the client's creditors to request payment relief. The Disaster Response Network's approach ensures survivors have a personal financial expert working with them throughout their recovery. By helping minimize the financial impact of a disaster, survivors can recover more quickly. To get confidential disaster relief assistance, call the Disaster Response Network at 877-833-1746. Once again, that is 877-833-1746. Or visit knowyouroptions.com/relief for more information.
Can we go back for a minute? Because I do want to say that one of the things I think that Coffey Strong, which is the name of your formal nonprofit, you all did apply for a formal nonprofit early, which was super smart. So I do recommend that for sure, because it enables other groups and foundations like ours in order to support you even more. And one of the things that came up was the Coffey Park walls. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's how we really got Rebuild North Bay really blessed us with help with that. We had an unusual roadway, a major thoroughfare, 2 lanes on each side, signal lights, really the entryway to our neighborhood. Had these unusual mason, they were like cement block walls along them. They were mainly for sound, but also for protection of the houses, built in the 1970s. And so on either side of this thoroughfare, and they were basically the back fence of these houses on either side. I think it's a total of 42 houses, so like 21 on each side. And none of us, even the homeowners, didn't realize that this wall was not city property. This wall was their personal property. And it was all burned, but it wasn't all removed. And so it was not structurally sound. It was awful looking. And it was going to be up to each and every homeowner to rebuild their section of that wall. And of course, as we know, the insurance coverage and the financial situation and the ability to rebuild for each of those is going to be different. And yet that was like, it seemed like a public work, that corridor and that wall. But according to the planning department, it was a fence.
One of the things that I loved from a funder point of view is that, you all were so good and so organized early on that it was easier actually for their paper, our regional newspaper, which just in Sonoma County alone, we have 500,000 people. So the regional newspaper is probably going to reach close in the 5 counties, maybe like 400,000, I'm sorry, about 800,000 or 900,000 people. So I'm reading and I see one of your neighbors talking about this fence and this wall essentially. And I'm like, oh gosh, that sounds terrible. But then I get a call from your public works person, David Gouin, and he wants to, sit down, find out what we're doing. And when I went in there, he really sat down in front of me with a map. And he understood, because not only had he been working directly with your neighborhood because of block captains, and you all were so organized, but he also, because they knew that it was not a public works not the city's responsibility, and would place an undue financial burden on those 42 homeowners. And so here was the crux, and could we help to solve it? And I was excited because it gave me a place, and it was, how sometimes the universe conspires for you. And then I got a call from Ashbridge saying, if we gave you $500,000, what would you do with it? And I was like, here it is. I would rebuild the coffee park walls, and we won't take an admin fee. It was important to us because we'd had PG&E money that we definitely we wanted all those funds to go to you. But I also had to make sure that you guys, because respect and integrity all the way through is really just so critically important. So I called Jeff O'Krepke and I asked him, was it okay? Because Ashbridge is a debris removal company. And I just wanted to make sure that if you guys were going to get this, that you were great with it all the way through. And credit to Ashbridge, a lot of companies will not fund construction. It's too risky. There's a lot of issues with it, but we were in an incredibly unusual circumstance. And they pretty much said yes right away. It took about 6 months to work out all the legal details. But I have so much respect for the fact that David was a great advocate for you guys. And then the city worked really hard on making sure that all the permits work. And then Steve Rahm, who is he's now the current president of Coffey Strong, he actually did the project management while he rebuilt his house. Like, it was
and worked full time building other things. Yeah,
and
incredible
family. I mean, there were just so many elements to how you all were working together, and how and the first year, Jeff O'Krepke, maybe even the first 2 years, Jeff O'Krepke was the board president. And one of the really big challenges that came was right of entry. So for those of you who don't know, you have a disaster, and then you need to fill out these right of entry forms for like the EPA and your county, so that they can actually enter your property. Well, you guys had to find 42 homeowners who were not living there, and some of them never intended to live there again, in order to get their right of entry form signed.
Yeah.
And they did it.
Yeah. Yep. We had a summer barbecue where we had a pop-up tent. Come sign your right of entry form. Sasha and Annie hounded and searched for these people and found them, and that all came through. So it's an amazing blessing. Yeah.
It was very much due to like how you ran your social media page, how there was just a lot of elements to that. And so we did get it done. Notably, we broke ground on the day that the campfire happened. So I have not forgotten that. That we all looked up and said, uh-oh, that's a problem. But the other thing that's really important is that because you were so organized, that you all chose the design. You chose the contractor. Like, nobody did that for you. And so by organizing, you can also become sort of the creator of your destiny, how your neighborhood will look after. And you've had some other successes since then. I was really pleased to see that your park is open again. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, in fact, when you said that we made those choices, our park, which is a 5.5-acre neighborhood park with 2 playgrounds and a track and a field, it was destroyed and had to be fenced off for basically almost 3 years, fenced off. But the city parks department worked very collaboratively with the residents of our neighborhood in this amazing civic engagement endeavor, and the public art department as well, and some organizations like Kaiser Permanente and the Rotary Club, who were contributing to it, and really developed a park that we collaboratively designed that was fulfilling the vision that we wanted in our park. We didn't want images of firefighters in our park. We wanted gardens, and we wanted places to meet. We have now ping pong tables and chess boards and exercise equipment, and really a beautiful children's playground, and a new dog park that we never had before, because celebrating life, that's what we want to do. And we've had at the school, the kids, the fourth graders of the local elementary school, spent a whole unit figuring out what the park should be. They spent a whole unit figuring out what they wanted in their park, and they made presentations, formal presentations, to city officials and the neighbors on, they wanted a pollinator garden. That was the fourth graders' plan. So we have that. There were things that they designed as well. So it's really been a joy.
I think one of the really, there's an inspirational moment in a disaster that is so traumatizing, and it kind of goes back to where people think maybe you're just crying all the time, but you can also build strength into your life. And this is why reimagine is part of our tagline. Is this is a testament yet again to, you can take this terrible thing that happened and you can then say, okay, this awful thing happened. How might we reimagine our neighborhood in a way that will work for our families that are here? Can you also talk about the opening to Coffey Park? Because I think that's really beautiful.
Oh, we call it the entryway. Yeah, there's these two corner small landscaped parcels that we had to figure out who actually owns these. And it's still a big question mark. It's not really anybody, but they really are. There used to be a sign there that said Coffey Park and some plantings, and Coffey Strong took that upon our plate too, to really make them beautiful and make them, it took a lot of funds. It took a lot of bingo nights to raise money. It took a lot of collaboration to put in landscaping, irrigation, and these beautiful semicircular benches where you could sit and rest and meet a friend if you're going to go for a walk, and become a welcoming and happy place. And right now it is decked out in Christmas lights, because that's something we love to celebrate the holidays together. And so our Christmas in Coffey Park elves, as we call them, have been working late at night, and every day you go out and there's something new lit up in either the park or the entryway, and it's been really fun. Yeah.
So if you were talking to a new community that was newly fire affected and they were just needing to know that they can get through this, can you just, one thing I would like you to address too is how to take care of yourself through this process, because a lot of people don't. And it's a true danger. Mental health through a disaster is any issue I had before can be exasperated. No, that's not the right word. Edit that out. It can be, what's the word I want? Any issue you had before can be made larger by a disaster. But I like to tell people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, with Coffey Park, one of the wonderful things to watch was that you were really like a bedroom community. And maybe you knew some people, but not everybody. It's a pretty large planned urban development. But I like to say now that after the fire, you're all spooning in the street together. Like every Christmas, you've done something together. So if you could address the issue of maintaining your balance internally and what it's done for your community emotionally, externally, that would be great.
One of the things that, each of us brought our own talents and interests as we volunteered. And I still get an email sometimes where people say, can you share this with your Coffey Strong staff? I'm like, we're all volunteers. There is no staff. We all volunteer. And we all bring different things to offer and are interested. So I worked really hard on things related to landscaping and redoing your landscaping. Another thing that I worked hard on was mental health. And I got involved with as a steering committee member of the Sonoma Community Resilience Collaborative, which is a local mental health initiative that sprung up after the Tubbs fire, because realizing that folks have PTSD or dealing with the grief and loss and trauma. And so we've been going out and meeting in small groups with folks and helping people cope. It is important to take time to reflect on and grieve what you've lost. and really touch in and see how you're feeling, both physically and mentally, about what happened to you. And with just pushing it aside and pretending it didn't happen is not a healthy thing to do. So to be able to look at it, name it, say, I lost a lot there. I went through a very difficult thing. But then also to be able to say, but now, here I am now. That's really important to be able to acknowledge, like, look at me, I'm strong and healthy today. I have some resources and not be alone. Big part of personal resilience is to have social connections that you can trust, you can talk to, and you can rely on, and you can share your feelings with. Definitely be connecting with others to share problem solving, but to share mutual encouragement and love, basically. It's really important. And we found, I know through my church, I remember this just maybe several months after the Tubbs fire, those folks who suffered the most, who were maybe the last ones left in the shelter, those were the ones who didn't have a social network.
Interesting.
People who were really not making it didn't have people connected to them. And why wait till another disaster to form connections with people? When people say, hey, I want to have a cup of coffee, say yes. Get to know your neighbors. Do you know all the neighbors around you? Get to know them. Bring them a poinsettia and just say, hey, I really want to know you. You don't have to be intrusive, but like it's important to know one another, because then you can look out for each other no matter what comes. If it's a pandemic or if it's a fire or a flood, you know who lives around you. And that's an important part of your resilience, your mental health, and caring for each other.
And that can be extrapolated to how you as a community all cared for each other. So I would like to say, hey, where are you talking to us from right now?
Oh, this is my beautiful home, which I've been home for a year. It's hard to believe, but this is gonna be my second Christmas at home. We love our house. We used a local builder helped us get back here. My kids are here. We're all Zooming school and work through the day.
And
we're
gonna be okay at the end. It's nothing that anybody would choose. It's like what Vita said, Vita Iskander, she was like, this is the member of another word for poop club. And, you wouldn't choose to join it, but if you're going to join it, we're really lucky that there are people like you who can help new members actually navigate this time. I really want to thank you for spending this time with me and all the work that you've done. I really have a lot of admiration and respect for you.
It felt like I was doing the work I was meant to do. So it always came from a place of like, of course. And I reflected on that, and it's important to have grace with one another. Grace was a word that I used a lot because there were times I had to take a break. It just became exhausting. And then through the recovery, there may be new people who come up and say, you know what, I'm better now. I feel like I can help. So don't forget that too. Somebody who may not have stepped up the first month or two, but later they'll be ready. And to understand that it's a long process and we're all ready in different capacities. So
yeah, turns out we are in this together.
Yeah.
That's the best way to make it through.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us on How to Disaster, a playbook to recover, rebuild, and reimagine. Thanks so much, Pam.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us on How to Disaster, a playbook to recover, rebuild, and reimagine. I want to leave you with this one thought. Thank you for spending your time with us. And we want you to know that you can get through this. You can recover, rebuild, and reimagine. But there's only one way you're going to do it, and that's together.